Well, what we have for today is the other one of the classes that was missing from the reworks, from the good old Power Word update of, at this point, a month and a half ago, which is Priest. All three of the specs have gotten their talent trees reworked, plus also the general tree of Priest. We're going to start with the simpler one of today, together with the general tree of Priest, which is going to be a Discipline. Holy and Shadow are a little bit more complicated, so we're going to leave them on a side for now. Also, take in mind that there are so many changes to the way the things work that you could go around, ask 10 very experienced Priest players, and they could probably all give you 10 different versions of their ideal talents. So there is still quite a lot of differing opinions on how the talents have been changed for Priest. There are, however, a few interesting things worth pointing out, especially to everyone who isn't even that familiar to Priest, doesn't even, know all of the ins and outs of the Priest class and specs. So the first thing worth pointing out when it comes to big changes is that, number one, this rework of the talents have made getting Shadow Fiend much easier than before. Before it was towards this end of the tree, now it's gonna be one of the mainstays of all three Priest specs. Another one of the major changes is that the entire part about Shadow Fiend, about Shadow Flame Prism empowerments has been removed from the general tree and is now in sole possession of Discipline Priest, right down here. No longer one of the general Priest abilities. A few more things that are quite eye-catching is this thing right here in the middle. You have seen these two icons before. However, you have always seen these two icons next to each other as a choice in your talents. Body and Soul and Angelic Feather. Now, they're not. Now you can take both Body and Soul, giving you 40% speed when you shield yourself, plus Feather for 40% more speed when you walk over one. I'm still not sure if it's gonna stack and give you an 80% move speed, or if it's just both of them are just refreshing the 40% movement speed, but at the very least now you can take both of them at the same time. Another one of the changes is perhaps a little bit more contentious. Discipline Priest right here, and even Holy Priest and even Shadow Priest lose a little bit of utility, because if we go to the current talent trees in live, let's go to the talent calculator for Priest, there is this thing which has come quite in handy recently, Shining Force. Right, this one is a knockback, so it can create some CC in Mythic Plus packs, for example. It can even be used in raids. It has been used in mechanics, for example, for Rygalon, for managing the cosmic motes around the fight. Now it's gone. Now Shining Force is no longer available in any talent tree. It's dead. There is a comeback, however. Right here, you have the option to increasing the amount required to break your Psychic Scream by 75%, or Void Tendrils. Summons shadowy tendrils rooting up to 5 enemy targets within 8 yards for 20 seconds, or until the tendril is killed. So you do have a new sort of crowd control in the form of roots in exchange for losing your knockback. That's the main change when it comes to crowd control coming into this tree. Also, despite the rework, despite the several changes to these talents, no, Priest is still not getting its interrupt. At the very least, Healing Priest is still not getting its interrupt. It's only still available as silence in the form of Shadow talent, not for Discipline and not for Holy. More changes in the general tree include this thing right here. Vampiric Embrace is now a general talent obtainable by both Discipline and Holy. It is no longer a special pick of Shadow, it's also available now to the healer specs. This is of course a far cry from the power of Vampiric Embrace from like Burning Crusade or something. This is just healing a nearby ally only. It's effectively trash, and it's effectively going to be used exclusively in PvP. If even that. So it's cool that now all three specs have access to Vampiric Embrace, but now Vampiric Embrace is such a weaker version of its original self that really doesn't matter. Lastly, on this list of interesting changes is something we pointed out when we read the dev manifesto about Priest a couple of days ago, about how they were going to make Renew and Flesh Heal apply Atonement and be part of the rotation of Discipline. This means, okay, what happens to Shadowmend? Well, If you look at the top right of this tooltip, you will see that Shadowmend reads now as a 15-second cooldown. That's right. It went from being a spammable ability to being a 15-second cooldown ability. Why? Well, you have a following supporting talent. Every time Purge the Wicked or Shadow War Pain deal damage, you can increase the next heal of Shadowmend up to 50%. You know, at the end of the day, as Discipline, you were spamming Shadowmend if you were in danger, if you were in a critical situation. Now you will be spamming Flash Heal, and you gained an extra button. Before, it was just Shadowmend spam and you did not use Flash Heal. Now, you can use Flash Heal and you can also use Shadowmend as a different type of ability. A longer cooldown, massive single target heal on a pretty short cast time, 1.5 seconds. More interesting things in the general tree is number 1, your Master Spell on a 45-second cooldown can become a 20-second cooldown Master Spell with a half-second cast time, so nearly insta-cast. Master Spell on a 20-second cooldown. This is very strong for utility. Whenever you have some heavy dispelling needed, it can become quite useful. Also, an addition which I think can become much more than just a meme in Mythic Plus is Mind Control. Currently, Mind Control is garbage because, you know, you have to lose control of your character to Mind Control. Dominant Mind, you may control your own character while Mind Control is active, but Mind Control has a 2-minute cooldown, so this can be used to a much bigger effectiveness now in Mythic Plus. You could, of course, already use it. Right now in Shadowlands. But you know, this was another crowd control that you could take, and this thing was a little bit sketchy to use. You might have gotten a few mobs here and there with some OP abilities, you know, to use them for yourself. But now that they are just here, a couple of talents to go down this line where you don't really want to take Vampiric Embrace because it's garbage, this is kind of nice. It might have a pretty good use in Mythic Plus for priests. We also had in the notes of the devs the announcement of the 2 abilities, Angelic Bulwark as a defensive and Void Shift. Void Shift having a 5-minute cooldown, you know, makes it much less exciting than when we read the tooltip. You know, 5 minutes is it's a very long time to have to wait for this ability. On this side, we still have the red line of Mind Games. You take Mind Games and then you take the cooldown reduction on Mind Games whenever you use one of your main abilities, and lastly you have an additional duration, 2-second duration on Mind Games, an additional 25% damage, and reversing an additional 25% damage or healing. But for the healing side, what's gonna be the standout is this side. Not only do you get Angel's Mercy, which is an extra defensive for your Desperate Prayer, and then you have the return of Surge of Light, which wasn't available to Discipline, wasn't available to Shadow, at least in that version. It was only available to Holy Priest. Now this exact same version, an 8% chance on your healing spells and smite to make your flesh heal instant, is now also available here. And lastly, the Holy Ward life ability. I was worried about the actual cooldown of the ability itself, but actually now this is very strong, because an ability that can heal for 400% more when the target is below 35% HP and have its cooldown reduced by 20 seconds means that it goes from a 30-second cooldown to a 10-second cooldown. Also, if you read, the base mana is effectively free. Just look at Renew. 1.8% base mana, just look at Holy Ward Life, 0.5. It's basically a free cast, and it's massive. 150% spell power increased by 400%. It's going to be the largest single target heal in the game, short of some lay on hands type of healing. Oh, and of course, it's an instacast. It's an extremely powerful ability specifically for Discipline, who specifically has severe problems in bringing up low HP targets very quickly. Now you have Shadowmend, which has a massive heal multiplier, which can be taken together with Depth of the Shadows to make it 50% stronger, so the 350% spell power becomes some massive 520% spell power heal, and then you have Holy Ward Life as well. So your panic button for single target healing has gotten significantly stronger as a Discipline Priest. But what about the Discipline tree itself? The first thing I want to point out, the first thing that is going to jump to your eye if you are a Discipline Priest in 2022 Shadowlands expansion, is that Spirit Shell and Evangelism, the 2 talents that have divided the playstyle of Discipline depending on the boss, this question can be completely removed now that Evangelism is here and Spirit Shell is here. They are also in their exact same versions, pretty much. 10-second duration of Absorb Shield that absorbs 80% of their value on a 90-second cooldown is the same version of what we have in Dragonflight. Same goes for Evangelism, extending the duration of your atonements by 6 seconds. This is the same that we have now. The only option of Evangelism is Lenience, which is of course here. So you can take now the last row talents together. You also have the addition, this one we knew already from the original version of this tree, which is Light's Wrath. So an extra big burst of damage to also have an increased damage based on how many allies you have with your atonement. So of course a big hit in the raid is coming out, you spread atonement to like 15 people, massively increased damage to Light's Wrath for then massive atonement healing or absorb shielding with Spirit Shell. Some of the more interesting points of the original version of Discipline have remained there, luckily. For example, you have Schism with the talent to make Schism 3 seconds longer. You also have an extra help to Spirit Shell. Now Spirit Shell can also be made 3 seconds longer, so you have 13 seconds long worth of time to ramp as a Discipline Priest, no longer just 10 seconds. Also not really as strong, but you do have an extra help to Pain Suppression. Power Word Shield reduces the cooldown of Pain Suppression by 3 seconds. This is, much less important, to be fair. A bunch of other things haven't really changed that much. You still have a few returning talents like Borrowed Time to give you haste whenever you Power Word Shield. You have Contrition to get your penance to spread healing to all targets with atonement. You have Castigation to give you an extra bolt of penance. You have a few new extras like Harsh Discipline. When atonement has healed for a total of 200 times, your next penance is free and fires 3 additional bolts together with Balance in All Things, the brother of Balance of All Things of Druid. Balance in All Things, your damaging shadow spells increase the damage of your next holy spell within 6 seconds by 15%, and guess what? Your damaging holy spells increase the damage of your next shadow spell cast within 6 seconds by 15%. We have, as when we mentioned the whole lack of the Shadow Fiend part in the general tree, now it's here. You have the transformation into the Mindbender talent right here. You have the cooldown reduction to your Shadow Fiend or Mindbender given by Smite, Mind Blast and Penance casts right here. And then you have the last point, the capstone point of Shadow Flame Prism to work with your Mindbender / Shadow Fiend. A new interesting final capstone is Will and Woe. Your penance bolts increase the damage of your next smite by 8% or the absorb of your next power shield by 3%, stacking up 7 times. So 64% more damage to your next smite or 21% more absorb to your power shield if you fully stack it. But what is perhaps the standout new change to the Discipline 3 is the left side, starting with the option between Make Amends and Train of Thought. Make Amends is a weird addition to have your duration of atonement on yourself increased when you penance do damage, or the duration of atonement on the target increased when you heal with penance. The more important one is Train of Thought. Flash Heal, Renew, and Shadow Mend reduce the cooldown of Power Word Shield by 1 second, and Smite reduces the cooldown of Penance by half a second, but more importantly, Divine Aegis and Aegis of Wrath. Divine Aegis is what was mentioned by the devs when they talked to us about the rework of Priest. Critical heals create a protective shield on the target, absorbing 15% of the amount healed. Critical heals with Power Word Shield absorb 15% additional damage, followed by the choice between Aegis of Wrath to make Power Word Shield absorption even stronger, or Indemnity, atonement granted by Power Word Shield lasts for an additional 3 seconds. As you know, Power Word Shield in Dragonflight will go away with the Weakened Soul debuff, will go away with being a spammable ability on multiple targets. It will instead now have a cooldown. It will absorb for way more, it will be more impactful, and now you will have more talents around the absorption shield of Power Word Shield, making it stronger and also reducing its cooldown. So it can definitely become another part of the rotation of Discipline Priest, much more than it has been recently. Likely, I would say, the end goal, I think, is still not turning Discipline Priest into a bubble spamming bot like it used to be around the time of Mists of Pandaria and Warlords. That was not definitely an interesting playstyle, but still making Power Word Shield more powerful and more impactful is definitely better than the current version of Power Word Shield. There are still a few questions, a few problems with this talent tree. The main question is, and this is something that probably will become a non-issue if it keeps going down this road, which is the damage in Mythic Plus. Because, you know, if you go through one healer talent tree for Dragonflight and you're like, well, this looks cool, but the damage for Mythic Plus is kind of missing. And then you go to the second healer and you're like, nice tree, but where's the damage? And then you go on the third healer, and then fourth healer, and then fifth, and then sixth, and all of them, even the new evoker, and all of them end up having no damage in the talent tree, then is it really a problem? Because the options for damage here in the discipline tree are quite limited. Even moving away and giving more power to Power Word Shield is indirectly lowering the damage of a discipline priest. If you bring Power Word Shield to be more part of your rotation, then you're also losing damage because you are using Smite, Penance, or Mind Blast less than what you're using with Power Word Shield, so it can be kind of a worry. Then again, many other healers have lost pretty much a lot of their damage compared to Shadowlands, so is it really an issue if this talent tree doesn't give you too much damage? At the very least, for discipline, you do have a very clear outlet for your damage down this entire row. You can take Shadow Flame Prism, which should be more than enough to give your healer AoE damage in Mythic Plus, doesn't it? So for discipline, I wouldn't be as worried. I wouldn't be as worried as the damage they are lacking as when we will go over the Holy Priest, or even when we will go over other specs like Holy Paladin lacking damage. But for discipline, I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think the general priest tree has been reworked quite nicely. You have still some quite good options. I'm not sure if this is going to stay as it is. I think it's much easier now to just gain both of these together right in the middle. Yes, Twist of Fate has been nerfed, but at the very least now it works on both damage and healing. Before, your Twist of Fate was after healing a target below 35%, and then you went into the Shadow Tree and before damaging a target below 35% health. Now Twist of Fate has been nerfed, but it's after damaging or healing, which means Holy Priests and Shadow Priests and Discipline Priests can now gain it much more easily. Especially the healers can now gain it much more easily, even if it's now just 10% increased damage or healing, as opposed to the 20% increased damage and healing of the healers. So I think that from the back of the general priest tree, there have been quite a few good implementation to the disc tree, especially the choices that you now have with Spirit Shell and Rapture, together with Evangelism, the addition of Light's Wrath together to your cooldowns. You are losing Boon of the Ascended, you are losing an extra ramp ability, but you are replacing it with Light's Wrath. On top of this, you still have the option, by the way, to take Mind Games. You have your new Train of Thought cooldown reduction, plus the Divine Aegis late game scaling with more crit and more absorb shields for discipline. It's also quite good. Overall, I thought that out of the three specs of Priest, the new discipline one is the more complete, the more sensible one compared to Holy and Shadow that we will see in the next day or two when we will go over them. I think it's the one that seems more finished compared to the other two. Even though there are still some questions, like why are we still working around Shadow Covenant, why are we still trying to give some support to Shadow Covenant, but overall I think it's good enough for now when it comes to Discipline Priest. So, with this being said as well, let me guys know, of course, all of you Discipline Priest mains and lovers of Discipline as a spec, how did this change for you? The good and the bad, the pro and the con of this new reworked Discipline talent tree. I am pretty excited myself because I am choosing my healer for Dragonflight, so I am default in the Shaman camp, but Discipline or Priest as a whole for now is my next in line, my next contender to be played as a healer. So I am not too worried at the moment at how the Discipline Priest tree has been reworked, so I'm pretty positive about it. But let me guys know, since you know more than me about Discipline, how have you felt this new rework for Discipline? For now, however, I am going to leave you to the rest of your weekend. Thanks, of course, to all of my patrons for supporting me. This is what allows me to continue to produce content for WoW as we wait, of course, keep waiting for the access to the beta so we can start to get a little bit more into the content rather than seeing it from the stands as a spectator. You can, of course, support myself and this channel by liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel. I have done it, by the way. I have started to subscribe myself to the channels I watch, just for consistency of this request. And also, for further social simping, you can follow me on Twitter, right down below at this link, together with subscribing to my Patreon as well. With all of this being said and done, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, it's close. It's close. We are going to get our camera back, I think, in the next 2 to 3 days, you know, by the end of this week, start of the next week. So stay tuned for the new mustache, you will see.